again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
-15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I am Brendan Mortensen alongside Matt Bonaparte. Bones, this morning we were talking favorite players ever. I think everybody's got just a specific player from their childhood that they point to. But you had 3, which raises the question for me: how many favorite players are you allowed to have?
Well, I mean,
like if you said this guy's my favorite
Brendan,
player,
it's a free country.
Well, sure it is.
You should be able to have as many as you'd like.
I think here's the thing. The way you presented it, you said, this guy's my favorite player. And then about 2 minutes later, you said, this is my favorite player, talking about an entirely new person.
Yeah, that happened.
It did.
Well, also, you forgot the part where I said the first guy was my favorite player of all time.
Yeah, right.
But
then
it was
about
really
2 minutes
just
later, it was somebody else.
It was really just some exaggeration, some hyperbole, you know?
Sure. But how many can truly be your favorite of all time?
Well, you know, going by the phonics there, 1.
Yeah, I'd say so.
That's your answer, kid. I don't know what to tell you. It's about as much as I've got there.
I'm just pointing out the fact that, you know, really the hypocrisy of it, of saying, well, you can only have 1 favorite player after our conversation this morning of the multiple guys that you pointed out. And then you named 3. You really tripled down on it.
Matt Kemp, Melky Cabrera, Tim Lincecum.
I wasn't going to put you on the spot like that.
They're wondering.
But those are your favorites.
Yeah, I love those guys.
With an S.
I just something about the way they carried themselves on the field, the way they played.
But if somebody
Cabrera,
said to you, who's your
probably
favorite
before he went to
player
the
of all
Giants.
time, would you say any one of those 3 and have it be an acceptable answer?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
I
just
probably would have
rotate which
told
one you
you.
say.
I probably would have told you Lincecum. I love that guy. He was awesome.
That's a fair answer.
He was like the coolest guy ever.
Thank you for acknowledging, by the way, the fact that I moved the microphones back.
Yeah, you did,
Because
man.
last, 3 shows, we've talked about how the microphones are too far forward. We couldn't converse like we normally do. Well, it wasn't like that at all. It was more so
I tried to recreate
this was over
it.
here, and it was a whole thing. But now I've moved them so we can converse.
Hey, man, thanks.
Hey, man, you're welcome. We've got a lot to didn't like that. We've got a lot to converse about today. We're going to talk injuries in the Orioles starting rotation because, my goodness, there have been a bunch of them. But first, Bones, we have got to talk about the month of June that is coming up for the Baltimore Orioles because, oh boy, do they have a heck of a month of June schedule-wise. They are currently in the midst of a long, long stretch of consecutive division games, 14 to be exact. They've got the 3-game series against the Red Sox, which concludes today. A weekend series against the Rays, which starts up here on Friday at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm sure it's going to be a packed house. That is a very important series. Then they go at the Blue Jays and at the Rays. That is 14 consecutive division games. That's, look, for a division that the Orioles and Yankees have been jockeying for position at the top. The Blue Jays have been underperforming a little bit. The Red Sox and Rays are hanging around as they do. These next 2 weeks are going to be absolutely massive. I know it's early on in the season. It's just June. This isn't going to decide the division, but this is going to make a massive, massive difference down the stretch.
Only one way to describe June, and that is gauntlet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just an absolute gauntlet.
With that amount of emphasis on the beginning of the word
Yes.
as well.
How about 1 day off in the month?
It's not many.
That's the craziest part to me. I mean, they play just an insane allotment of teams. I mean, the Braves are in there, the Phillies, the Yanks, the Guardians are in there, and then, like, you know, the Stros, who, you know, they're not playing the best baseball they've ever played, but still a talented team. Rays twice, a 4-game set with the Jays, and a 4-game set with the Rays. It's an absolute gauntlet. I mean, this is an absurd schedule. I don't know who did this, but the Orioles deserve some, you know. I mean, if they get out of this alive and still jockeying for position at the top of the AL East, or maybe in first, I think they deserve a medal of some sort.
Yeah, I think a mean person did this to the Orioles. I think that's the answer you're looking for. As you mentioned, They go from these 14 consecutive division games, so they'll end that stretch in Tampa against the Rays. Then they've got 3 games against the Braves, then the Phillies, 1 off day, which is their only off day
17th
of the month, as you mentioned. After 6 games against the Phillies and Braves, who you could argue are 2 of the best 3 teams in baseball.
The Phillies
right
are
now.
the best team in baseball right now.
The Phillies are the best team in baseball.
And the Braves might be Acuna getting hurt doesn't help their case,
Right.
but still might be the most talented team. Like, they have to face Chris Sale.
They're still right up there. And then after that off day, they've got a series against the Yankees, 3 against the Astros, who, as you mentioned, are underperforming but are starting to come back. You can't kill the Astros. Then the Guardians, who have a top 3 record in baseball right now. And then they end the month with the Rangers, who, again, are underperforming a little bit, but are the defending World Series champions.
Yes, they are.
So that is a heck of a month. The Phillies, Yankees, and Guardians literally have the 3 best records in baseball right now. The Rangers and Astros, again, on paper, are incredibly talented teams who are underperforming a little bit. We are really going to find out what these Orioles are made of.
Of the bad teams in baseball, those are like the last 2 you want to play.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Bad teams solely by record right now, not by a team you would want to face at any point. It's going to be tough. This is going to be a really difficult stretch for the Orioles, only with 1 off day. It's going to be a real challenge for Brandon Hyde. We're going to talk about the decisions that he needs to make pitching-wise, but lineup-wise, too. This is really where the depth of this team is going to help, I think, as well, because a lot of guys are going to need off days because there's no off days built in. We could see this outfield really, really get rotated with really 5 guys deep right now with Kyle Stowers and Austin Hayes. And then the infield as well. I would be surprised if we didn't see more of somebody like Ramon Arias when guys need more off days in a month like this. And there's no off series either. It's not like you can throw out, I know there's no real punt lineups, but if you wanted to, you got to go all out. I mean, for 14 consecutive division games, and you've got to go with your best against some teams that have some of the best records in baseball. It's just going to be a hard stretch.
Yeah, and I think this could be the month you look back at the end of the season to see, obviously it's still early, but June is the beginning of where games really start to matter and the records start to, mold out a little bit. And this could be the month for the Orioles that you look back to and say, how'd that go? Who'd we play?
Right.
How did that dictate how things went further on? And your point about guys needing to get into the lineups and whatnot, I think is pretty valid. Last night, Jordan Whisper got drilled in the wrist. Obviously, we hope he's okay, but we don't have any status on him. And it just shows you how quickly a guy could get hurt. And we don't know if Jordan Westbrook is hurt. Obviously, we hope he's healthy, and he came back into the game afterwards. But still a scary situation. So, I think they're going to need all hands on deck, and I think nobody knows that more than Brandon Hyde.
Yeah, I think this, again, could have the potential of separating the Orioles from some other teams that we are considering the best in baseball. A, because of the quality of depth that this Baltimore team has, and B, because you can look around some other teams in baseball. I know the Phillies have dominated everybody they've played, but, there are always going to be arguments and narratives everywhere saying, well, the Phillies haven't played enough teams with winning records, or, the Astros or something, or this or that. If the Orioles get through June with a solid record and they are still jockeying for position at the top of the AL East, I really don't think there are any narratives that you can point to about this team other than the fact that if they get through this and they beat good teams, that's what they did. They beat good teams and are towards the top of the league.
Other than the playoffs last year, this is probably the biggest test they're going to have this month.
Yeah.
It'll be really interesting to see how they attack it, see what they do in terms of strategy and how they're going to manage the bullpen, because I'll tell you what, the bullpen's probably going to be massive through this stretch.
Yep.
So it's going to be a really, really interesting month. Maybe they make a move here or there. Who knows? But it'll be very interesting to see what kind of strategy the front office and the manager's office employs during this absolute gauntlet.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that is going to make June a challenge is the injuries that are really plaguing this Orioles starting rotation right now. Going into the month of June, Brandon Hyde had said, yeah, we're going to potentially look at a 6-man rotation because we've got one off day in June. The starting rotation is going to be taxed. The bullpen is going to be taxed. You know, you can't expect every single one of your starters to give you 6 innings every day. And with just one off day built into the month, that's a lot of bullpen arms you're going to have to run through. And having as many starters as possible is only going to benefit those bullpen arms as well. It's going to help you get deeper into games and help you survive a month like this where you don't have any days off, where you can just rest guys. And going into June, it looked like the Orioles were going to have the starting rotation that we dreamt of at the beginning of the year. In the offseason, when the Orioles traded for Corbin Burnes, we made those starting rotation graphics. And you could look at that 5 and say, wow, you've got Corbin Burnes, Kyle Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez, John Means, Dean Kremer. That was an unbelievable 5. And at that point, too, you still had Cole Irvin and Tyler Wells fighting for potential rotation spots. We didn't know Albert Suarez would turn into a potential option, and obviously we didn't know that Bradish and Means would not start the season with the team, but those were the 5, really the 7 at that point that you had where you went, wow, this could be a heck of a starting rotation. And for whatever reason, the baseball gods do not want the Orioles to have that absolute gauntlet of a rotation with that unbelievable top 4, rounding it out with Bradish and Means, with Burnes and Rodriguez at the top. They've got a lot of injuries right now. Let's start with Dean Kremer. On the injured list, retroactive to May 21st with a forearm injury. Brandon Hyde said that he's doing better and should start playing catch soon, so we're not sure. You know, hopefully Kremer is able to come off the injured list as soon as his 15 days are up, but we're not 100% sure on that. You want to be careful with any sort of arm injury with a pitcher, obviously. Had a 4.32 ERA before going down. Looked really good in the start, before the start in St. Louis when he got injured. So obviously a tough break here for Dean Kremer.
Yeah, brutal. I mean, and he was Dean Kremer before he went down. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough. And a guy like that is incredibly important because he goes out there and he just gives you solid innings. You know, he's not going to pitch like a Cy Young necessarily. Maybe he could, but he probably won't. But he's not going to blow up very often. He's going to give you a solid start more times than not. So to lose a guy like that is pretty tough. And for a rotation like this, where it seems like that one meme where, you know, you flick one of the switches on and then the other one turns off. That's what it feels like. It's like, all right, you get Burnes, now you don't have Bradish. Okay, you get Bradish, now you don't have Means.
Right.
You know, kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, they just can't get healthy, like you said, and that dream lineup we made all the graphics of seeing all those guys in the rotation just hasn't come to fruition just yet. But, yeah, I mean, losing a guy like Kremer is tough, and Wells as well, but the things that you have that counteract that are the incredible play of Cole Irvin thus far through the season. I mean, he has been absolutely fantastic in the rotation. As a starter this year, a 2.58 ERA, a 1.103 whip. He's 5-1 when starting games. I mean, he told us in spring training that he was going to be better this year, that he prepared better for the season and whatnot. I think we both believed him, but I didn't expect him to have a 2.58 off the mound as a starter right now. So that's one of your saving graces. Another one is that Albert Suarez has been an insane weapon. This guy, who hasn't pitched since 2017 in the majors, has just been ridiculously good every single time he's taken the mound. Suarez, I mean, you just have this guy as any time you need a spot start, Albert Suarez can pitch. As a starter this year, a 1.86 ERA in 4 starts. He came out of the bullpen 7 times. He's got a 0.5 ERA out of the bullpen. The guy has been lights out.
Yeah.
And just invaluable weapon for Brandon Hyde to be able to use whenever he needs to. And one of the reasons why the rotation's injuries haven't taken such a toll on the record at this point in the season.
Right. Yeah, we're going to talk about Irvin and Suarez and what this rotation is going to look like moving forward. But, you know, going back to Kremer, it's, as you mentioned, he's going to give you solid starts every 5 days. Only 2 starts this season in which he has not worked into at least the 6th inning. And he was just kind of the reliable one for the past few seasons here. Gave you 32 starts last year, 21 starts in 2022. So tough to see him go down because he had just kind of been one of the few mainstays in this rotation. Tyler Wells, as you mentioned, really no updates on him. He's on the injured list after making just 3 starts to begin the season. He's in Sarasota rehabbing right now, was cleared to play catch last week. And then I think probably the most significant recent injury in the starting rotation is John Means. Left forearm strain, on the injured list once again. 3 innings against St. Louis that was cut short due to a weather delay, but it seemed like he was going to be out of that game after 3 innings either way with some discomfort. Yeah. James McCann noticed it right away. He had a noticeable velocity drop in that inning. Apparently he was in the clubhouse already, despite, not knowing whether or not that game was going to continue with the rain. So he is currently getting a second opinion on that forearm strain. And it's just really difficult for John Means because he has been so good when he is healthy. He made 4 starts back with the Orioles this year with a 2.61 ERA. And you could tell how much the clubhouse really looks to John Means and admires John Means and the kind of player and person that he is, and recognizes the fact that he has just had some really, really tough breaks with injuries over the past few seasons. It's easy to forget just how good he was. Obviously, you can think back to moments like the no-hitter, but John Means was the Orioles' sole all-star in 2019. He made 26 starts in 2021 with a 3.62 ERA, 10 starts in 2020 during that weird COVID season. But John Means is one of these players, along with guys like Austin Hayes and Cedric Mullins and Anthony Santander, who have been here through everything, through the rebuild, through the tough seasons, and has now seen it through to the other side. And unfortunately for Means, he hasn't gotten to pitch much on the other side of things. He makes 2 starts in 2022. He makes 4 starts in 2023. Came back at the end of last season. We were so excited to see him. It looked like he was going to make a huge difference in the Orioles playoff rotation. Maybe he was going to be starting some games against Texas. He had a 2.66 ERA down the stretch. And then he gets hurt and doesn't make the playoff roster. And then in 2024, it was, okay, we're ready for John Means to start the season. And then Brandon Hyde comes out and said, oh yeah, he's a month behind schedule. So we wait to see him again. Makes 4 starts with a 2.61 ERA. Looks fantastic. The whip is under 1,000 for the 2nd consecutive season in a handful of starts. Gets injured again. This is 10 total starts over the past 3 seasons for John Means. We are obviously keeping our fingers crossed that hopefully, like Dean Kremer and like we saw with Grayson Rodriguez, this is a 15-day IL stint that is only 15 days, and he comes back after the minimum there. But to have a similar injury to what he was dealing with coming into this season and still trying to work back from Tommy John, obviously it makes a difference on the field, and we're going to talk about the differences that it makes on the field. But just holistically, it's really a bummer to see John Means be such a big part of this team during the difficult seasons and just not be able to enjoy the sustained success that this team has had over the past 2 seasons and continue to push this team forward and help this team because A, he's a great pitcher who would help this team immensely and does whenever he is on the field, and B, he just deserves it. He deserves to see this thing through to the other side.
I was just going to say he absolutely deserves to see the success because he was there like Austin Hayes or Anthony Santander when they weren't winning this many games. Yeah. It's very tough. The injuries are a brutal part of the sport, and his recurring injuries have been, very, very difficult coming back and only getting a couple starts here and there before having to hit the IL. I mean, and the other thing is, like you mentioned, or alluded to, he's playing so well. Yeah. He hasn't been
when
bad
he's on the field
for 3 years.
Right.
He hasn't had many bad starts in the past 4 seasons that he's played. The guy's been rock solid. I mean, everything you could have wanted from a pitcher. It would be one thing if he came back like old veteran arm, can't quite get the job done, hits the IL, whatever. He's one of their most effective starters. I mean, this guy in 4 starts, a 2.61, like you mentioned, the whip is 0.8. The strikeout per walk is 8. He only walked 2 guys this year.
I mean, his first start back from injury this season. He went 7 innings, 3 hits, no earned, no walks, 8 strikeouts against the Cincinnati
And he's doing
Reds.
that throwing 90.
Yeah.
Like, he's just a good pitcher. He's
Yep.
one of the last guys in the league, or one of the only guys in the league right now, who's just a true crafty pitcher. Knows what he's doing up there, knows how to get hitters out, and he just goes out there and gets the job done, which is why it's such a bummer not to be able to see him on the mound.
Yeah, has one of the best change-ups in the game. Again, this is not John Means is... We don't know what this injury is going to look like this season. As I said, hopefully it's the minimum 15 days on the injured list, and we see John Means back in an Orioles uniform pitching well for the rest of 2024. Maybe the Orioles can get him some more rest, limit his innings here and there when needed, and we can see this guy consistently down the stretch. But it's tough to know what this injury is going to look like. Obviously, somebody getting a second opinion doesn't sound great, and we're not going to speculate, but hopefully John Means will be back sooner rather than later.
You can only hope with
Yeah.
injuries, and, we don't have any inside info on that.
Yeah, so that really messes up the plans for the Orioles 6-man rotation. As we mentioned before, Brandon Hyde was hoping that with this brutal June stretch, he could go to a 6-man rotation with Cole Irvin pitching so well in the rotation, and he could save the bullpen a little bit. He could, try to limit the Orioles starters' innings. I mean, remember last year, towards the end of the season, a guy like Cole Irvin really saved this starting rotation. The Orioles went to a 6-man rotation, and it saved a lot of these arms because you had guys like Grayson Rodriguez and Kyle Bradish who had just never had that many innings in their professional career.
Yep.
And switching to a 6-man rotation was really their saving grace down the stretch to keep these arms fresh. And obviously it didn't work out in the playoffs, but it was huge for them down the stretch last year. And yeah, maybe somebody like Corbin Burns can get through a stretch in June, no problem, and just give you 6 innings, 7 innings every time out. But for the less experienced guys, for somebody like Kyle Bradish and Grayson Rodriguez, who are coming off of injuries that you're trying to continue to ramp up a little bit and make sure that their arms are totally good to go, a 6-man rotation sounded like a godsend. And now that plan is kind of out the window because right now you're looking at the Orioles starting rotation. Corbin Burns has made 11 starts. This is not going to be a Corbin Burns conversation, but I just want to say for whatever you want to say about Corbin Burns and maybe the fact that he hasn't had utterly dominant starts where he's striking out, 12 guys and going 8 innings, no earned, whatever have you. Every time out, he is going 6 innings, no more than 3 earned runs, still striking out a bunch of guys. And this is exactly what you traded for. Not only is it somebody who is going out and shoving every 5 days, but he's posting every 5 days.
Yes.
That's what Nace does.
He stays healthy. He goes out there, and he gives you a chance to win the game. That is what Nace does, and that's exactly what Corbin Burns has been. He's been fantastic pretty much in every start for the Orioles. So, I don't know if you can ask anything else from that guy. He's got a 2.6 ERA through 11 starts. He hasn't missed one. Ace.
Yeah,
That's all I can
11
say.
starts, has yet to allow more than 3 earned runs in a start. And for an Orioles team that has really been hit by injuries, especially on the pitching front, Corbin Burns just going out and posting every 5th day and being the ace that he is. Cole Irvin has not been injured. He's just been in and out of the bullpen. We saw him recently make a start after a few stints in the bullpen. Outside of that, Grayson Rodriguez, Kyle Bradish, John Means, Dean Kremer, Tyler Wells have all been injured at some point this season. You could make that a solid 5-man starting rotation on its own.
Yeah.
And all of those guys have dealt with injuries. Obviously, Grayson and Bradish are back, and that's great. But the fact that the Orioles have had to fight through that many injuries in the starting rotation and they still have this record is pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, it's tremendous. The team is so talented that when one portion of it goes down, they can pick each other up. I'm not sure, just raw talent perspective, I'm not sure there's another team in the majors that top to bottom has what the Orioles have right now. Everybody, they're just such an incredibly talented team at every single position that when injuries strike, they can pick each other up. And obviously, we've talked ad nauseum about the depth they have in the minor leagues, who they can bring up, and they still have all those options too.
Yeah, so we've talked about the injuries and where Kremer, Means, and Wells are as of right now. Let's talk about what the starting rotation looks like without those three guys at the moment. Corbin Burns is at the top. He is him. He's going to post every fifth day. Grayson Rodriguez and Kyle Bradish as your 2 and 3 in whatever order you want to put them. They are still pretty fresh off of injuries, and I think there's probably no training wheels there, especially after Kyle Bradish's last start, where he looked unbelievable with 7 no-hit innings on 100 pitches. Just by the way, if you're arguing that Kyle Bradish should have stayed in that game after 100 pitches and 7 innings, even to try to get a no-hitter, don't argue that. Just don't. He had 100 pitches. He is pretty recently off of injury. If Kyle Bradish tossed 130 pitches and, God forbid, got injured, but had a no-hit bid broken up in the 9th and then couldn't pitch for the rest of the season because Brandon Hyde pushed him to 130.
Never forget what happened to Johan Santana.
I don't think he would ever hear the end of that, ever. Justifiably so. So, yeah, you take him out after 100 pitches. 7 no-hit innings is great. It's not going to give you another win if he tosses a no-hitter. No-hitters are very cool, not when it comes at the risk of one of the best starting pitchers in baseball. Anyway, that was a quick rant.
Glad you got that out.
Thank you. Grayson Rodriguez has looked great in his return as well. I don't think there's training wheels on those guys right now, but you do want to be careful with them because they are still pretty fresh off of injuries.
Yeah, I mean, Grayson last night got knocked around a little bit early, but he settled in, had a career high 10 strikeouts. I mean, this is a guy who I think we're watching him become, a major league pitcher. Last year he struggled at the beginning of the season when he came up for the first time, went down to the minor leagues, came back, was fantastic. This year, for the most part, he's been absolutely fantastic. Has gotten knocked around by a couple of teams, but for the most part has been one of the most effective starting pitchers in all of baseball. So, yeah, I don't think there's training wheels on him. I think we're just watching him develop into what we all knew he could be. And to the people who overreact and say, oh, this guy can't be an ace because whatever, this, that, and the other thing. I mean, I don't even know what to tell you. The guy is just raw talent. He's just an incredible, incredible talent on the mound.
Yeah. Bradish, as I mentioned, threw 100 pitches. We saw Grayson get up to 94 against Chicago, tossed 90 last night. I think, obviously, you want to be careful with them.
Yeah.
But I think training wheels are off. Those guys are back from injury. They look healthy. They look great. So the top 3 is set. Then after that, things get a little bit cloudy. But with your 4th spot right now, it's very solidly Cole Irvin, who has been stepping up in just huge ways throughout this season. Makes his first start in a few weeks after getting pushed to the Orioles bullpen with the return of Grayson Rodriguez. And just a ho-hum, 5 innings, no earned runs against the Red Sox. As you mentioned, Bones, he's got a 2.58 ERA as a starter this season. This is the Cole Irvin that the Orioles traded for a season ago. This is somebody who can bounce between whatever role you need him to, which is a really, really difficult thing to do, by the way. I don't think we can underplay how hard it is, especially for somebody like Cole Irvin, who wants to be a starter, has shown nothing but promise in the starting rotation. Yes, he is pitching great on the mound, but also just to have the mentality of, wherever the team needs me, I'm going to go out and I'm going to pitch well. He's done it out of the bullpen. He has done it out of the starting rotation. And it is really admirable, the effort that he has given the Orioles in his past however many outings.
Yeah, and you say this is what they were trading for. I think this might be more than what they thought they were getting.
Yeah.
He has been absolutely tremendous. I mean, the effectiveness that he's brought to the rotation, it just can't be underplayed. With all the injuries and whatnot, to have a guy that you can rely on that you just didn't expect to be this good is a godsend, especially early in the year when momentum can just swing one way or the other for the entirety of the season. To have a guy like that who can pick you up later in the rotation, like obviously every time you get back to Burns, he's going to give you a solid start and kind of resets the rest of the guys. But when you have a guy like Cole Irvin later in the rotation, the 4, the 5, or the 6 spot, and he can give you a start like he's been giving, it just changes everything for the team.
Yeah.
To not have to overcome huge deficits, and the Orioles can because their offense is so good, but not to have to is huge. It's just massive.
Yeah, and it's funny. We always, I think we had a show in the offseason when the Orioles traded for Corbin Burns, where the rotation felt pretty crowded. That was when everybody was healthy. We were still expecting Bradish and Means to start out the season, and you had Cole Irvin and Tyler Wells that looked like the odd men out that were maybe going to be arms coming out of the bullpen. They were long guys. You know, they were going to be making spot starts here and there when needed. Unfortunately, injuries always make those sorts of conversations pretty much obsolete, because we were talking about how crowded the Orioles starting rotation was. Yeah, now we're talking about Cole Irvin and Albert Suarez in the 5-man rotation. Suarez wasn't even in the conversation among those 7 at the beginning of the year. So injuries, especially with pitchers, you can't have too many. Mike Elias talked about it in the offseason. Everybody around baseball knows these kinds of things happen, and that is why pretty consistently you need 7 or 8 capable starting pitchers to get through a season. And the Orioles are incredibly lucky that somebody like Cole Irvin, who is their de facto 6th starter right now, maybe even their 7th if everybody was healthy and you had Tyler Wells too, to have somebody like that who is talented enough to be your 6th, 7th starter, come in and do the job that he is doing, I think, as you said, better than anybody expected. That really speaks to the quality of depth that this team has and Irvin's ability to bounce back and forth and do that.
And it's not only in the majors, man. The minor league arms that they've had have really been wowing me. I mean, the numbers are pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I want to get to there.
Yeah. We're going to talk about those guys in a bit, but with that 5th starting spot right now, I mean, I guess you're just keep trotting out Albert Suarez until somebody
That's what I'm
hits
saying,
him, right?
man. That is what I'm saying. And until Albert Suarez is figured out by the league, he is just mystical at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Albert Suarez comes up and makes a spot start when the Orioles really needed him. And I remember watching that game from the stands. I went to that game as a fan when Albert Suarez, Minnesota Twins, back in mid-April. It was his first outing in the big leagues since, what, 2017?
with the Giants.
And he goes 5 2/3, 3 hits, no earned, 4 strikeouts.
Just ridiculously good.
Wasn't overwhelmingly dominant, but just there was no hard contact against him. It seemed like hitters just really were not figuring him out. He makes 3 starts for the Orioles. In his final start, he gives up 4 earned runs against the Athletics, and you thought, okay, well, maybe they've figured him out a little bit. The Orioles decide to keep him on the 26-man roster. He bumps into the bullpen and allows 1 earned run total in his relief outings. And then more injuries happen. Against the White Sox, they say, hey, Albert, we need you to make a start. He goes, great. 4 innings, no earned.
Yeah. I mean, ridiculous. I don't think, I mean, remember when we were in spring training and I couldn't even pick between Andrew and Albert Suarez. I didn't even know who either of the guys were when we got
both
there.
Suarez's, yeah.
And I didn't think, and in that moment, I did not think I'd have to know who Albert Suarez was as well as I do right now. The guy has, I think, exceeded every single person's expectations, probably including his.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he has been just, he's that good. He has been that good right now.
Yeah.
He's just the epitome of effectiveness on the mound. I gave you the stats before, but as a starter, a 1-something ERA, as a reliever, 0.5. You know, like it's not even like he's been pretty good. He's been dominant. Every time he's on the mound, it's like, yeah, he's gonna give you a good start. And the other thing is, like you said, it's not overwhelming. It's not like he has a big motion or anything. He just steps into a throw and gets guys out. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, out of the bullpen, he has been getting up to 97, 98 on the radar.
He throws hard. He does throw hard.
He's still throwing hard. It's just not overwhelmingly dominant in terms of the strikeout numbers.
Yes.
He's averaging 7.5 strikeouts per 9 innings. Look, I don't know how long Albert Suarez is going to last with a sub-2 ERA, but for right now, until somebody hits him, just keep him in the starting rotation, I guess, because you need him until somebody like Dean Kremer comes back, and he's been incredibly effective. And again, just another luxury to have, like Cole Irvin, where if he's in the rotation, great, he's going to shove. If he's in the bullpen, great, he's going to shove. It just really, really a luxury to have 2 pitchers that can give you that kind of versatility.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, I just don't know how many teams in the league have swing guys like that where they could be effective anywhere you put them.
Yeah. We have gotten some questions about Cade Povich and Chase McDermott as to whether or not the Orioles could call up one of those guys with all of the Orioles injuries in their rotation. I think it would probably have to be a more long-term injury for one of those guys to get called up. As we mentioned right now, Cole Irvin, yes, it would be a luxury to have him in the bullpen, but right now he is really effective in the starting rotation, and I don't think you would really be able to justify having Povich or McDermott in the rotation over Cole Irvin right now. I think as the rotation is currently constructed, with Dean Kremer, John Means, and Tyler Wells all on the injured list, probably you could make an argument to have Povich or McDermott come up and fill that fifth starter spot over somebody like Albert Suarez, assuming that Albert Suarez doesn't continue to have a sub-2 ERA. If Suarez keeps shoving, great. Keep him in there. But I think if Kremer or Means... I really think it might have to be both Kremer and Means.
I was going to say
out for an extended period of time, which obviously you hope does not happen and doesn't end up being the case. But I think it would have to be all three of those guys, Kremer, Wells, Means, out for an extended period of time, because you don't want to call up Povich and McDermott and have them bounce in between the bullpen and the rotation. You don't want to treat those guys like Irvin and Suarez. Not anything against those two pitchers. They're very talented, but they are not prospects that you are not primarily focused. You want to win games, but you're not focused on their development like you would be for Povich and McDermott. And so for those two guys, I think you want to make sure they have a spot in the starting rotation if they're getting called up, where you can give them at least 4 or 5 starts at the big league level every fifth day to try to prove themselves.
I think it would have to be a situation in which there are only 4 guys healthy, capable of starting.
Yes.
Like they would need a fifth starter. Like it would be a situation in which they'd either be deciding between bringing a guy up or trading or signing for somebody.
Yeah. I mean, look, who knows how long Suarez is going to have sustained success. I think you could make an argument that with Kremer, Means, and Wells out for an extended period, that you should call up Povich or McDermott and have them be your starter over somebody like Suarez. Because right now, we'll see what their roles turn into, but Cole Irvin gave you 5 innings. Albert Suarez gave you 4 innings. Those guys aren't really stretched out for a full starting rotation role. And especially in a month like June, it would be so valuable to have those 2 guys in the bullpen that can give you 3 or 4 innings if you need, so that you don't have to use multiple bullpen arms to make up the 3 or 4 innings that Irvin or Suarez could give you in a relief role. So I think there are a lot of arguments to be made for Povich and McDermott if these injuries are extended ones. But as of right now, hopefully with Kremer on the right track, if Dean Kremer comes back and it just has the minimum 15 days on the injured list, I don't think we're seeing Povich and McDermott anytime soon.
I agree. I mean, remember that this is a front office, and Mike Elias said this earlier in the year. He doesn't like to bring guys up unless he knows almost 100% that they're going to have some success.
Sure.
He doesn't want to bring a guy up if he's not 100% sure that he can compete at the major league level. And not to say he doesn't think that about those guys. I don't know what he thinks, but my point is it takes a lot for him to feel comfortable bringing somebody up to the majors.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it would probably take a lot. And in the case of McDermott, I still think there's some tinkering to do.
Sure.
Whip is really high. It's almost 1.5.
Yeah, it's 155 right now.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was looking last night. I didn't see the stats from today. His K per 9, 14. Yep. So that's really, really good. I mean, it's actually ridiculous. Yeah. So, it's there, but like it was for Povich last year and the year prior, he's just got to get some tinkering done, and I think he'll be one of the better prospects, starting prospects in baseball sometime soon.
Yeah, Cade Povich, 10 starts, a 2.35 ERA, 71 strikeouts, and 19 walks.
Pretty
I don't think there's
good,
any question that numbers like that and the success that we've seen from Cade Povich would play at the big league level, but I think there has to be a spot where Mike Elias feels that that guy could be successful. Not just that he would help the team, but, Cade Povich and Chase McDermott are 2 guys that you're hoping are going to be in this Orioles starting rotation for years down the line. So you don't want to call them up and bounce them in between the rotation and the bullpen and have them not start every 5th day and just be here and there. You want to put them in a position for success.
Exactly. And, bringing up a guy in a position where maybe he's not ready or whatever, as we all know, confidence can be key at this level. It is key at this level, and you don't want to shatter guys' confidence or whatever by bringing them up only for them not to succeed. So, yeah, I mean, you want to be sure about these guys, and regardless of the numbers, Povich looks great, but they're going to wait for the right situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bones, that unfortunately gets to the end of our topics here. I just do have one more remaining, which is Bones reads the Gettysburg Address.
Not going to read the Gettysburg Address.
You're not going to read the Gettysburg Address?
No, I'm not going to read the Gettysburg Address.
Well, I was hoping for it. And unfortunately for Bones and for us, this is going to be our last show. And, you know, I have been very lucky here on this podcast. When I first started out, you know, I did this show with Paul Mancano, who is one of my best friends in the world. He is a fantastic guy and did amazing things on this show. And I felt very fortunate to have started my professional career in a situation where I could sit on a podcast and just chat about baseball with one of my best friends in the world. And when Paul left, it was obviously a role that was irreplaceable, but Bones, you have come in and not only brought a wealth of baseball knowledge, but you have become one of my favorite people in the world and one of my best friends. And it has been such a privilege for me to be able to sit here and be able to just talk baseball with two of my best friends in the world. And for the wealth of baseball knowledge that you bring and your insightful analysis, I think, you know, the thing I will miss the most is the smile you bring to the office every day. Bones is one of those guys, if you have the pleasure of meeting him or if you see him at a game, make sure you say hello because your day will be brightened. I can guarantee that. And, you know I've said this off the microphone and I'll say it again. If I tell a story as well as you tell one, then I will have succeeded in my broadcast career. I think I could call it quits right then and there, because if we weren't talking Orioles baseball, I would have this podcast just be 45 minutes of Bones telling us a story about some guy that he ran into at a restaurant, and it would be more entertaining than the Orioles baseball that we are talking about. But Bones, we will miss you. I know the fans will miss you. I will miss you. And it has been a genuine pleasure to be able to get to talk baseball with you, my friend.
I'll miss you too, man. Thank you so much for those kind words. I've loved doing this with you as well, and I really appreciate it. Been just a blast to be able to talk baseball with you this whole time and get to know you and become your friend. So I really appreciate you taking me under your wing and helping me out here. So thank you so much. And to Amy as well, here every Wednesday with us. Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And to the listeners, I appreciate you also taking me in as an Oriole person. And it's been very nice to be a member of Birdland for over a year now. So thank you to Brendan, Amy, and the listeners. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, the Bird's Nest isn't going anywhere. We will be back. We're going to take a few-week hiatus here, figure out what we're going to do, who is going to fill that miraculous chair that Bones has filled. But we're going to be live at some point on a Wednesday at 11 a.m. here on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you so much for following along. We love reading your comments, so please come back with us live here in a few weeks when we get the Bird's Nest back up and running. Or you can follow us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts or your digital shows. You can find us here on the Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Amy Jennings behind the scenes, and a big thank you to Matt Bonaparte. I'm Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.